we asked a few brilliant minds in dental to join us for our next panel. They sat down with our very own Mike Buckner to discuss what is and isn't working for practice growth in 2019 and what you should be doing moving forward. Please welcome Eric Roman, Hazel Glass, Sarah Hansen, and Chad Duplantis. You won't want to miss this.
We'd like to welcome you to the Practice Growth Summit, and we have put together a panel today to further discuss practice growth and marketing. And we have several experts from the industry from all across the country, and I'd like to kind of introduce each one of them. Maybe we'll start over here with Eric. Would you like to introduce yourself and kind of a little bit about your background, where you've come from, and then we'll kind of move on down the line.
Sure. Hi, I'm Eric Roman. I am a general dentist by training. For the last 10 years, I've spent my life in building and operating dental group practices. And in the past years, I've transitioned from simply building and operating my own practices to coaching and guiding others in the process of developing their own.
Perfect.
My name is Dr. Hazel Glass. I'm a comprehensive dentist. I'm redefining what it looks like to be a comprehensive dentist. I own my own practice in Marriottsville, Maryland. I run a nonprofit. I'm a dental speaker as well as a coach. So that's it.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hansen. I've been in the dental industry for 19 years. I started dental assisting and moved my way through the practice. I've been administrating for several years and running practices, and now I'm transitioning into consulting, doing practice management consulting and speaking.
Awesome.
I'm Chad Duplantis from Fort Worth, Texas. I have a group practice in Fort Worth that focuses on aesthetic and restorative dentistry. We treat all ages, don't turn away many cases, just try to do a little bit of everything comprehensively. And in addition, I lecture, and that's about it.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to this panel. We're excited to have you. And my name is Mike, and I'm the Director of Business Development for Weave. So with that, we'd like to just jump right in and kind of discuss maybe some of the growing pains, what has changed over the last few years when it comes to marketing, when it comes to technology, and growing your practice. So the first question I just want to open it up to everyone is, how are you bringing patients back into the practice? So before we talk about growing the practice, what are we doing with the patients that are currently in? What have you found effective, and how do you maintain those patients rather than going out and bringing more patients in?
I'll be happy to start, Mike, since I'm on the far end over here. I'll say two things. Number one, one thing that we've been doing is we've been making sure that those patients have an appointment before they leave our office.
Perfect. We
We are face-to-face. We are right there. We're inches away from them. And it's become now a cardinal sin inside our offices to allow that patient to walk out without the appointment. There's a lot of data and research that other groups and people that are much smarter than me have put into this, and the data is conclusive. There's a better chance they come back 6 months down the road if they have an appointment before they leave. So that's the first piece. But the second part of what we're doing to bring patients back in is we're giving them a great reason to come back in. And we're making sure that we focus on starting our relationships with our patients. One thing that you'll see time and time again is that a lot of what's happening in our industry is commoditizing our services, right? Whether it's, you can hear a lot of argument about the clear aligner industries now being commoditized by Smile Direct Club, right? Well, the best way to fight against commoditization in our services is by having relationships, because that's the one thing that we can do inside the walls of our offices that's really unique in its delivery. So make sure they have an appointment and give them a reason to come back. That's what we do.
Love it. Love it. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I say, I agree with you totally. Differentiate yourself. And one of the ways of doing that is building relationships, making connections, letting people know that you see them as more than just patients. You're connecting with them as people. And asking for, even if they get that appointment, some people will make an appointment and they won't honor that. Reaching out to them, having the hygienist reach out, having the doctor reach out and say, you miss your appointment or you canceled your appointment, having them understand the value of the appointment. It's more than just about the appointment, it's the value of the service.
Mm-hmm.
So if we make it about missing an appointment, it's an appointment. People don't really care about that. But if you make it about addressing disease or about improving your smile or things that will impact their lives, it becomes a totally different conversation.
Yes.
So I want to take that
Mhm.
piece
Mhm.
and I want to kind of shift this just a little bit because I'd like to take that part of building the relationship, right?
Mhm.
Of giving them the reason to come back. And with the noise today that we have, I mean, there's so much noise out there. We are being bombarded with emails. We're being bombarded with texts, with so many different forms of communication, so many people that need to reach out to us. There's so much noise out there. How do we take the time? We have this dichotomy, because the dichotomy is that we want more patients coming in, so we almost, do you bring more patients in and almost kind of churn them out the door, or what's the balance of finding that time and taking the time to build that relationship? How, and I'm going to kind of shift it to you two to maybe answer that, is what are you doing in your practices in order to do that?
You know, back to Hazel's point for just a quick second. My business partner, Ken Kirkham, 15 years ago gave me the best piece of advice that anybody's ever given me. And he said that the majority of patients don't understand the difference between a molar and a Maserati, but they'll always know the way that they were treated in your office. So to your point, Mike, what are we doing? I think it's a couple of things. Hazel hit upon it by diversification of your practice. We're constantly innovating in our practice and we're constantly adding new things. We want our patients to realize that we're relevant. And the other thing that we're very strong upon in our hygiene department and our restorative department is we're very strong upon education. If you don't educate your patients properly, then they don't feel the need to respond to the care that you're recommending. I could walk in and tell you you need a crown, or you need to come back for periodontal services, or you just need to come back for another cleaning. And you know, if I just tell them that and walk away, then 9 times out of 10 they're probably not going to come back, unless they're a family member. But if I educate them on the necessity, and that's done throughout that initial visit, we're very big on patient education. If you don't have the educational component of your practice, you know, you're going to be losing patients quicker than you're gaining them.
And I agree. And I think in addition to what everyone else is saying, there's been so many fantastic points hit that I also believe your team makes a big difference creating the wow experience for your patients. If you have team members that are educated and involved within the patients, care about the patients, or trying to make their relationships with them, make the patient feel like they are truly not a patient, but a friend, that we know them, that we know their stories, that we know their lives. I think that helps, in addition with all these things, to create that experience for them to want to come back.
So how do you do that when things are so fast? How do you help them feel like they are a part of the practice, like you know them, like you have these relationships? What are you doing to create those and to maintain strong relationships?
Well, let me also go back to something that you mentioned a minute ago. Do you just bring all these new patients into the practice? Is that the key? I don't believe that's the key. I think the key is addressing the patient right in front of you. So many times we miss the opportunity to promote treatment and create relationships with the person right in front of us because we're jumping from room to room to room. And patients realize that, they see that. So, you know, with all this noise, with all of what's going on, people, I agree that they don't know if you are doing a crown or whatever you're doing. They don't understand that. But they do understand and want to feel, how does this impact me? And how are you going to address that? And do you have the expertise to do that? Right? And then are you going to have the follow through and the consideration of me after I become your patient? So, that's huge, because if you're just getting them in and out, they don't really have any trust. They don't feel like there's any real connection. You're not really communicating. It just becomes, they can get that at any dental office.
Mhm.
Well, and to Mike's question, how do we do this? How do we connect? We're at a really complicated time in history from a communication perspective, because right now inside of my practices, I've got probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 different generational dynamics, like behavior sets of patients that are inside there. And as practitioners, one of the biggest challenges, like, we want our patients to love our business. We want our patients to love what we do. But one of the challenges we run into is that when we try to communicate one way across those 6 different generations of patients, it can be received very different, where one generation says, oh, dude, it's so awesome that I can just book my appointment online. And the other one says, if you send me another text message, I will leave your practice and burn it down, right? Like, so we get this massive polarization of opinion in the way that we do things. So what we found is that we simply have to, first, we have to know who we are. And we have to know, first and foremost, who we are functionally marketing our practice to. And that's really difficult to say as a practitioner sometimes, but there is a perfect patient for Hazel, and it's a group of patients. And that may be different than my perfect patient. And so it's upon each of us to know who we are before we try to market just to gather anybody inside of the practice. It's kind of like, isn't it more fun to hang out with people you get along with? Well, those are the types of patients you want to have. So know yourself. And then we also have to be respectful, though, that we need to communicate in multiple different ways. And when it doesn't work for one patient in there, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. To give an example, something that really annoys me sometimes, have you ever noticed when you go to a website to look at, say, a pair of shoes, then you go for 3 weeks to a bunch of other websites and the ad keeps following you for that?
Yes.
But have you ever followed through and actually clicked on it and bought something? I have. So something that at first may annoy me actually functionally ends up working to garner my service, right? Or my product consumption. And in our industry, product consumption is oral health. And so is it such a bad thing if sometimes our patients are a little bit annoyed if the result is that they ultimately end up consuming where they wouldn't have, right? So, I don't know, just some thoughts.
Great idea.
Yeah, and when we're dealing with different generations, it's knowing how to cater and how to speak with each different generation. You have the boomer generation that is traditionally a very loyal generation. Yeah. They grew up, they weren't jumping around as often from job to job, and when it comes to consumer loyalty, absolutely, it was there. To the millennial generation or the Gen Zs, where loyalty is a scarcity, and it's very difficult to maintain loyalty. So what do you do to maintain loyalty? How are you maintaining loyalty with those patients?
I think it's providing a reason for them. I think it kind of goes, I think we need to be listening to our patients and what their needs are. I think your patients will not accept treatment if they don't believe it's necessary or if they don't believe in it. So I think for them, if they believe in you and they believe in the practice and you're listening to what their needs are, I think that creates an atmosphere for them to have loyalty. Even with a generation that maybe doesn't, if they're happy there, they're treated well, and there's a reason for them to be there, they will be, which goes down to kind of listening and understanding their needs.
Good point.
I think that is the most valid statement you could make. I mean, I stress that in almost every lecture that I give. That's the number one patient complaint. My dentist doesn't listen. My healthcare provider doesn't listen. And the facts are that the majority of us, and myself included in the beginning of my practice, would tell patients what they need rather to listen to what they want. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can't turn them around. You got to educate them on what they need, but you've got to listen to what they want before you go any further. And if you don't, you're going to lose those patients immediately.
The trust has to come first.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just going to throw a charge out there because you said something earlier that I think was fascinating too. And I was asked this a few weeks ago and I really had to ponder it. You have to deliver a wow experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every dentist needs to ask themselves, what is my wow?
Mm-hmm.
And in my office, I always go back to the Walmart versus the Nordstrom experience. Walmart's got great prices. They may lack in a little bit of customer service. Nordstrom's prices are only great during the half-yearly sale. But I shop there year-round because the customer service and the experience is what I want.
Right.
And even when I go into their store, they will walk around the counter and hand me the bag and thank me for being there. And that's the wow experience that I want my staff and my team to employ with our patients, is that not necessarily walk around and hand them the bag, but I want those people to leave with a sense of pride. Wow.
Yeah.
And so what's your wow?
I like that. I like that. So we've talked a little bit about retention. Yeah. Did you have a
Yes,
thought?
I wanted to. So it was a time with maybe the older generation. I don't want to use scare tactics, but you tell them certain things. They looked at the doctor as being the authority. You know, if you tell me what I need, I'll go ahead now because you're the authority. You know, you've had patients to say, well, you're the doctor. You know, let's go ahead and do it. This new generation, it's about now. It's about right now. So if it's not relevant to right now, I don't really care if it's going to hurt me in the future. You know, what about right now? And so, and they don't have a whole lot of time. And they, again, I used this word earlier, they've been desensitized by the movies. They're not as afraid as, you know, maybe people were in the past. They see murder all the time. They see all these different things. So if you're telling them about a toothache, I've never had toothache before. What's the big deal? So you have to make it relevant for them. And sometimes you have to get people in or surround yourself by individuals who understand and know that generation. So you have a lot of the older practices that are, you know, kind of antiquated. They're thinking, well, if you don't want my services, that's fine. No, it isn't fine because, you know, you're going to get all types of people into your practice. So you just, you know, you have to realize, again, to what Eric said, you have to realize who you're talking to and who you are.
There are more than ever, there are more choices now for the consumer. There are more sources of information to find a provider to decide where we spend our money. So we've talked about retention and shifting this over to growth and to marketing. I'd like to just understand from your practices, what are the things that you feel, if you could go back in time, let's say you could go back 5 years, what are the things that have worked really well that you wish you would have done earlier or wish were available earlier? And at the same time, what are the things that you wish you would have done away with, that you invested a lot of money in and maybe it didn't work as you thought it would?
Okay, I'll start.
Please.
You're at the end.
Do you know, 5 years ago, we were in a different world. And so things worked differently 5 years ago than they work right now. I think that probably anybody that's listening to this panel probably has examples of things that even in the past 12 months they've watched change, right? How many times do we wake up and hear, oh no, Instagram's dead, LOL, right? Like, I mean, things transition so quickly right now. I don't think it's fair to say what would I have done 5 years ago that I'm not doing today, but what I would have done a much better job of is measuring outcomes for what I am doing. Because regardless of whether you're old school yellow pages, regardless of whether it's direct mails or social media campaigns or website or word of mouth or community involvement, the real core of this is knowing what the outcomes are from the things that we're doing. If I could wave the wand and go back in time, I would love to have the data from the marketing that I was doing 10 years ago. To know how what we're doing today compares from a maybe cost per patient acquisition or a lifetime value of our patients, like whatever it might be. Now we put a lot of effort and a lot of money inside our company into measuring what's happening. Wish I could go back 5 years and have that data to know relatively where it was.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great point.
That's so true. You know, our data years ago was there was a separate number for the yellow pages or a separate number for the mailers.
They told you.
And when that number rang, 1, 2, we got 2 calls from that yellow pages ad.
Yeah.
And nowadays there's so many tools at our fingertips that are relatively inexpensive that we can track that, you know, in such a much better way. But so there's so much validity to what you said.
Yes.
Beautiful.
I think for me, I wouldn't have been as afraid. I think so often, so as dentists, we're gadget people, right? And sometimes we're not afraid to just buy up gadgets, but one, does that technology really work for your particular practice? Okay, so I would have one, not been so hesitant to invest in the technology that was really going to save me money and save me time. So that's one big thing. The other thing is that I think I would wish I had looked more into the metrics and where all my money was going when it went towards marketing. Because, you know, we kind of jump all over the place. If this doesn't work, let's go with that. If that doesn't work, then we're listening to everyone. And we sometimes don't give it a chance or know enough to see how well it is, you know, manifesting in your practice. And the metrics would have been an easier way to understand.
Great point.
I think, you know, looking at 5 years ago, I think for what I saw within the dental industry, definitely was having more doctors maybe get on board. I mean, if you can look back, hindsight's always 20/20, but maybe getting more on board with the social media. However, I feel like now currently what I found in practices that I work with are, one, what's incredibly successful is text messaging. Our patients respond incredibly well to text messaging, and that sort of communication, I feel like, kind of going back a little bit to the busyness of life, our patients don't answer phone calls, but our patients respond to text messages. And so I do think that that's incredibly important when it comes to marketing. You can market patient appreciation days, you can market a bunch of things through text messaging. But we've also found that patient referrals are always our greatest assets.
Yes.
They are our best referrals. And so I think moving forward within a practice to create, whether it's incentives for patients or whether thanking them, hey, thank you so much for your referral of this person. It's patients like you that make our practice so fantastic. I think that's a free thing. You know, it doesn't cost any money. Return on investment is fantastic. So, but those are always our best referrals. And those referrals then, you know, build upon themselves. A patient who has a great experience in your office will refer their whole neighborhood because this was such a great experience for me. So we've always found that in-house patient referrals are always our number one.
Beautiful. And so we take that part of it, right? And what are the things that are truly, you know, growing the practice? Patient referrals, which come from loyalty and building the relationships and giving them a reason to come back. So aside from patient referrals, what are some of the most important and valuable marketing tools or strategies that you have done to bring new patients in the door?
Well, I'm going to answer that. This sounds stupid. It's everything. What we learned is that what worked for us, like I said, just a few years ago, doesn't work the same way now.
Yeah.
Overnight, we can wake up tomorrow and Google can change a formula that all of a sudden has an impact on a great flow of new patients for us. And it can dry up just like that. Overnight, we can wake up and somebody else can be outbidding us for a similar previously successful marketing opportunity. And so the only thing that's consistent is inconsistency. And so for that reason, our philosophy has become try everything, measure it, but most of the times what our reaction is we measure, we're like, oh, the results were crap, I'm done, I'm not doing that anymore. We've now made a commitment to a minimum of 3 retest cycles. So we test, measure, retest, remeasure, and we do that 3 times before we will move away from something. Mm-hmm. It's funny because sometimes you're using one medium and you're learning things that are applicable to another. Sometimes it never works. Sometimes, but in all instances, we've become better at what we do, and we've gathered more and more data about where we need to be putting our dollars to have the greatest impact, right? And functionally, that's what it's all about. It's about impact on our patients. So,
I think for me, because of the type of practice that I have to use marketing that is relevant for my services. So, sending out newsletters that talk about the oral and systemic connection, or about nutritious foods that you should eat. And so that's one way of marketing and having that ROI, making sure that whatever marketing tool that I use in my practice is in line with my values. Another is connecting with companies that are not very intrusive, but can help me keep in regular contact with my patients. Yeah. Again, because of the type of practice that I have. I don't have a clinic. I don't have people coming in and out. I don't have this big group practice. So again, everything is built on communication and connection. So if I have a company that where I can reach out to them, and it's easy for them to connect with me through text messaging or phone calls, or it's good for me.
Yeah. Okay. Best marketing strategy for your practice?
Well, it relates back to what was stated earlier about building from within. I mean, our internal marketing has been strong for the past 15, 20 years that I've been with the practice. But what I mean by build from within is we spend most of our advertising dollars on our social media ads, our text to patients, our emails to patients, because the word of mouth does spread. When we bring a new product in the office, we start offering a new service. It's amazing how when you send out those little feelers, the responses that you get, not necessarily from patients, but you do get responses from non-patients, and so we just try to be relevant, be real, and promote that from within, and it seems to work. I really don't do a lot externally anymore because I don't have the need to, and it doesn't, our practice is doing well, and I always could be doing better, but we're at a very comfortable spot right now, and our growth is sustained. So what we're doing seems to be working from within.
Beautiful.
I have to agree 100% is that what I've seen in the past work and not work is the practices that are the most successful and that maintain those patients, because yes, we can market them, and yes, we can have 55 new patients that month, but if we have 45 that are leaving and become inactive, we are not retaining. So I think when we talk about marketing, we need to focus on retention as well. That's a very critical part to marketing. And your best retention will come from more of that internal. And so I think that is when, in terms of marketing, that is what you need to focus on to grow practices, is that internal first, and then it's a ripple effect. You can add on additional things to do, patient appreciation days, or, maybe be in a parade or something to kind of get your name out there. But I think when you're starting within, you are solidifying the loyal patients that we've talked about. And that is what's going to keep your patient retention high, which really is critical to maintaining our practices and maintaining them being successful.
No, this has been great. This has been really helpful because I think there is a common theme through this whole panel and everything that we've discussed. It starts with the relationships. It's about building those relationships, giving them a reason to come in, where the referrals will then come, and then getting the patient in the door is only the first step. It's getting them to accept treatment, to accept ongoing care, and that all comes down to the relationships, and how we nurture those relationships is our touch points and the communication and keeping those alive. I want to thank you all for being a part of this panel today, and thank you for joining us, and we hope to have you back here again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.